Welcome to the Evening Review. My name is Sukhane Tlhache, and joining us in studio is geologist Roy Miller, who used to head the geology directorate within government. We'll be talking about the in-situ mining process being proposed by Russian mining company Headspring Investments. But before we go into that interview, we'll go for a short commercial break. Welcome to the Evening Review.
Thank you very much.
There's been a lot of fanfare regarding the recent uranium deposits that have been discovered in the Omaheke and Hardap regions. There's currently exploration still ongoing, but what is being proposed here is in-situ mining. What is in-situ mining, firstly, and given what is being proposed, does it present any dangers to those areas of exploration?
All right. First of all, so far only 2 mineral deposits, uranium mineral deposits, have been found. They are in the drinking water aquifer. They occur underground in the artesian water of what we call the Stampriet artesian basin. And it extends from north of Leonardville way down to Kois, and from Stampriet into Botswana. And in that area, the only water that the people have who live there and farm there is the underground water. Now, the water table there is very high. So those ore bodies cannot be mined by conventional open pit mining or underground mining, because they would simply flood straight away. The only way they can mine that is by drilling boreholes down into the ore body. And remember that ore body is in the drinking water layer, the layer of sandstone with drinking water in it, that is pumped for drinking water for the whole region. They drill boreholes down into the ore body. They then take water and add sulfuric acid, which is battery acid, to that water. They pump that down into the ore body. That dissolves the uranium, and in a separate borehole, they pump the solution with the dissolved uranium out, and they process that solution on surface. They take the uranium out of the solution. They take the same water, they put a little more acid in and pump it in again. And so that water is recycled, and recycled, always taking the uranium out on surface and putting the water with a little more acid added back in. Now, in America, they do the same process. It's a fairly common process in the world these days for recovering uranium, but it's the only way of recovering uranium from water-bearing sandstones underground, where the water table is very, very high. In America, they're not allowed to use acid in drinking water aquifers. Acid leaching, it's called, because of contamination. While that mining is going on, because there is dissolved uranium in the water, that water cannot be used in the mining area and in nearby areas. But there are problems with that. Because of this recycling, that recycling in a big operation can go on for 100 times or more over a period between 3 and 5 years. So they're recycling that water many, many times for a long time, for several years. Always, they are monitoring boreholes just outside the mining area to check whether there's any leaking outside. They also have to check whether there's any leak of that mine solution into sandstones that have water above or below. And in the Stampriet artesian basin, we know that there are fractures and that the artesian water which is under high pressure can leak upwards into overlying aquifers. We know that. Guys who studied the groundwater in the past, that one was Professor Jürgen Kirchner, who was head of hydrogeology here for a long time. They think that some of the artesian water is escaping up old boreholes, water boreholes and coal exploration boreholes into higher aquifers, so that we actually have a good idea that the water does escape naturally from the layer with uranium to higher aquifers, so that we can get contamination, leakage horizontally along that aquifer and vertically up into other aquifers. So that's the process, and that's, put very simply, are the dangers. And because of that, America will not allow acid leaching. The other thing about acid leaching is that with the uranium you get other heavy metals deposited. They are not removed from the solution on surface. So they slowly build up in concentration in the recycled water until that concentration becomes toxic. So you can get that water contaminating good water because of the uranium, but also because of the dissolved heavy metals as well. So we should not allow this to happen in an area where the farmers and the people and the animals have no other water but that underground water.
There's currently exploration activities taking place, but we know that there had been issues with the issues of the boreholes, where the Ministry of Agriculture had to stop large-scale exploration going on in that area. Those exploration activities that had happened, or that are happening where it is being allowed, do they, with this mining method, present any dangers to the drinking water?
We don't know that, and we can't prove it. But of course, the drilling, we have been told by Headsprings that they have so far drilled about 600 boreholes with their exploration. And obviously, this is all underground. There is no surface expression of your mineralization. You have to drill boreholes one after the other to find that mineralization. So some boreholes will not be in the ore body, but other boreholes will be in the ore body. And once they do find the ore body, to understand it properly, they've got to drill quite a lot of closely spaced boreholes. Now, obviously the drilling will give you very, very fine powdered rock. And of course, also very, very fine powdered uranium ore. And that could escape into that is in the aquifer water, and it could escape further into the aquifer water. But we don't know at this stage whether that is contaminating the water or not.
Given now what has been happening, would it be safe to say at this point in time to say, okay, well, let's try a pilot plant to see what the likely effects could be, or could we perhaps be looking at something like that?
The pilot plant, in pilot plant operation or large-scale operations, there are many, many more injection boreholes than production boreholes. So in this pilot plant operation that's been proposed, they would have 4 injection holes at the corners of a square, a 15-meter square, and one production hole in the middle. So they're injecting quite a lot of solution, and to make sure that the solution flows from the injection hole to the production hole, they have to pump out more than they pump in. And the process, whether it's a pilot plant or whether it's a large-scale plant, is exactly the same. There's no difference. And the other thing about this area, just think if you're a farmer, you rely on two things for your survival. You rely on the rains to get the grass to grow, so you rely on grazing. And because the area is covered by Kalahari sand, the rain seeps into the ground pretty quickly. And the only year-round source of water is their underground water. So they rely on two things, the grazing and the underground water for the survival. If that underground water becomes contaminated, that is the end of the livelihood of those people next to an ore body and near an ore body, and maybe even further afield. And that's our worry. We cannot afford to risk contaminating that groundwater, because it's the people's livelihood, and we cannot replace it with anything else. That's the only source of water.
I'd like to continue our conversation on what is being proposed, but before we continue with that, we'd like to call for a short commercial break. We'll be back shortly. And welcome back as we weigh more into the issue of what is being proposed in the Omaheke region. The issue now, this company has said that they're conducting similar activities in Kazakhstan, in Eastern Europe. How different is the case of Kazakhstan to Namibia?
It's very big in Kazakhstan. They have been there extracting uranium by this in-situ leaching with the boreholes underground for a long time. And they know that process well for that area. But from articles I've read, that water there is already saline water. It's not very good for human consumption. In Australia, the way they mine, that water is almost half as salty as seawater. It can't be used for anything else. Right? And there are several layers in Kazakhstan where they've been extracting uranium. It's a very big operation there.
From what they have seen, journalists were taken to a visit on the farm on which exploration is being conducted. And the case that the company was making is that because of the mining that they're conducting in that area, used to not support life, but life is slowly coming back. You could see issues of greenery and so on. Does that would that be similar for Namibia, or Namibia and surrounding areas where you already see that there's a support of life, or could we see a complete opposite?
First of all, there's no mining at the moment. There's not even test mining. It's been pure exploration, and exploration stops at the end of drilling. For the pilot plant, an EIA is in progress at the moment. They've got to get a mining license from Mines and Energy, as well as an environmental clearance certificate from the Ministry of Environment and Tourism. And only then can they start to erect a pilot plant, if they've got those two, if those are approved. Now, governments in many African countries have a dilemma. If there's mineral deposits that will earn income for the government, they tend to support these projects. But we've got to be very careful here, because we cannot afford to contaminate an absolutely critical resource, that's the groundwater, that we cannot replace. And there's so much the livelihoods of the people and the animals depend on that water. Now, unless one is an expert, one doesn't understand how complicated the process is, how complicated the problems are. And most people don't have that expertise. And they see only the good things, the contributions that the company makes to the community, which, fine, we no objections to that. But it's like window dressing. The people think it's a good idea to have them come there, but they don't realize that it's actually not a good idea. It's a bad idea because there's the potential of having their drinking water contaminated with radioactive material. And the other thing that they don't understand is that if they're drinking water with uranium or other radioactive material in it, they might not feel it. One can't smell or see or taste radioactivity. They wouldn't see it, but if one's drinking it, one might begin to feel a bit uncomfortable after about a year. In 5 years' time, one is beginning probably to feel very sick. And the other thing is, what about the children? If they're drinking that water from a young age, they'll probably die from cancer or other complications from radioactivity before they're 20. And people don't realize that. The medical people understand radioactivity and the problems that it causes. But the man in the street generally does not.
And then during the visit to the farm, the governor of the Omake region, Piyonganate, said that there was a possibility that mining and farming could coexist. And if one looks at what is happening in the off the coast of Ranjemund, where dredging is occurring, the case is being made that it is not harmful to the environment, and that sort of the environment fixes itself over time. This issue, mining and farming coexisting, what is your reaction to that?
Mining needs space. All right, an ore body is not a small thing, it's generally quite big. And it can be, in Kazakhstan, they're long. And they can be long here. So it needs space to operate. But other areas further afield can carry on with mining, but one doesn't, because everything takes place underground where you can't see it. One doesn't know when leaking starts to happen, and one doesn't know how far that leaking will go. And the other thing about the Stampriet Artesian Basin, there are 100 sites where irrigation takes place. Now, irrigation uses 80% of the groundwater in that basin. So they're pumping the boreholes very, very hard. That means the flow of the water through the water-bearing sandstone, that is our drinking water, is flowing at times very, very fast through the mining area and out of the mining area. And we don't know how that will affect the solutions and whether that will draw the solutions abnormally fast through and out of the mining area.
And then lastly, just to touch on another issue that also relates to mining, the recent oil discoveries by Shell and Total. Your reaction to what could potentially come out of that area?
I think they're very positive, they're very exciting. They're in very deep water, 3 kilometers of water. before you reach the seabed with your drill rods and so on. But there are more structures there that haven't even been drilled yet. The present discoveries need more boreholes to be drilled into them to really get a good handle on how much oil could be recovered. But it sounds like they've been very, very good discoveries and very promising discoveries.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Evening Review.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this rather informative and educative segment of the Evening Review dealing with geology. Good night.